Okay, there's a showdown happening in Chicago, and it looks like Chicago is going to be a front and center battleground between Tom Homan and Mayor Brandon Johnson, because he has stated that mass deportations will start right here in Chicago, says Trump's border czar. Now, for those who don't know, Chicago is a sanctuary city, and I want to pull up just a couple of videos here to highlight just the growing movement against Mayor Brandon Johnson and his entire administration that has been that has been riddled with scandal. Um, I want to say, for those of you who haven't been following Harlan's media, we did do some coverage for Mayor Brandon Johnson, and also the entire city of Chicago election. And I, for one, have to say that Brandon Johnson was uninspiring. I did have hope that maybe he could turn things around after the aftermath and failure of Lightfoot. But when you're more hated and despised than Lightfoot, you must be one hell of an all-star performer to grow that kind of resentment towards you. So, Mayor Brandon Johnson, I think his time of being Chicago's mayor will be running short in 2027. So let's go ahead and first pull up two videos here. And then I got one hell of an article from Block Club Chicago, because there's a growing movement against the Democratic machine. And stuff like this has never happened before. The resentment, the anger towards Democrats is reaching an all-time high here in Chicago.
Anything right. Johnson, you made promises to people. You told people that you understood the struggle of the West Side. You understood the struggle of the black man. You understood that. Yet when you got here, it took you over a year and some change to put, $500,000 into a study for reparations. And yet you're going backwards. You're bending over backwards. You're cutting out other funds for the COVID relief and all of this stuff for immigrants that you don't know of, criminals who are coming over here. This is not a conspiracy. This has been confirmed. They're coming over here, breaking into stores, breaking into houses. They're coming over here and doing anything they want to do. No type of punishment. They're in and out of jail. Unlike the black boys that you said that you can relate to, that you said that you sympathize with. The only sympathy we've seen since you've been in office is to illegal immigrants who are coming over here and they're terrorizing and plaguing the community. And this is the last straw for the Democratic Party.
And the thing is, now it is still continuing to grow. I want to play another video as well. I've played a video of her speaking before City Hall, and I'll be pulling up an article very soon in which Tom Homan, Trump's new border czar, is going on a full-on warpath against Mayor Brandon Johnson and his policies.
Trump and Tom Homan, we need you to please come in Chicago and lock Brandon Johnson up if he try to stop you from coming in our neighborhood and getting these illegals out of it. We, the Chicago citizens, and we, the American citizens, want this. We welcome you. Please come to Chicago and make an example out of Brandon Johnson if he tries to stop you from coming in and getting these illegal aliens out of our neighborhood.
Now, I played those two videos to lay down the foundation for what we're going to see here. Mass deportations will start right here in Chicago, Trump's border czar, an event hosted by Chicago Republicans. Yes, they do exist here in Chicago. Tom Homan also said he would prosecute Mayor Brandon Johnson if he continued to harbor and conceal asylum seekers. Now, there's a lot to take away from this segment, but I remember when we first covered the idea or concept of sanctuary cities here in Chicago. Myself and Daniel asked a lot of these activists and some of the major, some key players who were there early on, is there a real plan to really help out the migrants, those who are seeking sanctuary? Is there a plan to really integrate them here into the city? For those who don't know, Chicago has a long, sad history of being a segregated city. In fact, we are a hyper-segregated city. Even Jim Crow laws would blush at looking at Chicago's early divisions that it did on its own people. This city has a long, sad history of violence, racism, abuse, corruption. It goes on and on and on. And the thing is, while those ideas sounded great on paper, there was and never was a real solid plan to help out the migrants. There was plenty of time to protest, or correction, not protest, do a parade of anger towards Trump, especially during the first 4 years of his administration. And since then, there's been nothing more of a lazy approach in which citizens of Chicago are upset that there are migrant shelters put in their neighborhoods without their consent. I did focus on one story in particular in which a migrant shelter was being proposed to be built in a neighborhood, and the residents had two very logical reasons to protest against it. Number one, they were not told of its construction. Number two, why would you put people on a toxic landfill area? They're going to get sick and die. So let's talk about this. So at Portage Park, President-elect Donald Trump's handpicked border czar said his mass deportation efforts will start right here in Chicago as he threatened local officials to open the city and its county jail to the will of the federal immigration agents. Chicago's going to be a battleground, and I encourage all of you to follow and support Hardlands media, especially when we cover the 2027 city elections. Tom Homan, the former acting director of U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement, addressed a friendly crowd of local Republicans Monday night at a Christmas party run by the Law and Order PAC at Vigo Events and Catering, 4242 North Central Avenue. I think I know where that's at. Homan told attendees that they'd see an influx of federal migrant agents after Trump was sworn in, warning he would prosecute Mayor Brandon Johnson if he continued to harbor and conceal asylum seekers. Do not impede us, Homan said after taking to the Trump Vance 2024 flank podium to a DJ remix of Bad to the Bone. Oh, God. Dude, don't be cringe. All right. One person shouted, F him, about Johnson as the crowd erupted in support. By the way, support for the Democratic administration of Mayor Brandon Johnson is reaching an all-time low. I mean, when your approval rating is lower than Lightfoot, you have royally screwed up. I don't know how else to say it. How did you screw up something that would have been so easy not to do? Don't be like Lightfoot. That's an easy thing. Anybody can do it. You can do it, and you can do that. Everybody. The people outside my neighborhood right now could do that. Don't be like Lightfoot. That's an easy task. Okay. Because of his actions, we're going to be arresting a hell of a lot more people than our priorities, said Homan, telling Johnson and other Democrat officials to get the hell out of the way. He added that he'd sue sanctuary cities that don't cooperate with immigration and custom enforcement. But Homan sidestepped questions about how he would coordinate with Chicago law enforcement or dismantle local legal barriers to mass deportations. Because that's the thing. Homan, listen, Homan. You may not remember the Keebler elf, but I do. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III. A name from the South, so South that even the South was like, boy, that's South. You all remember Jefferson Beauregard Sessions, who had a hard-on and anger towards the war on drugs, especially towards cannabis? Well, Jeff Sessions thought it'd be a good idea to infringe on state rights, especially in states in which it was legal for it to use cannabis for recreational or medicinal use. That boy got so fired so fast that he got rehired only to get fired again. Actually, no, he just got fired, but I just wanted to make a rhyme. Yeah, he got fired real quick. So remember, there's this thing called state rights too. Okay? Currently, the city and state have many protections in place to guard against federal deportation efforts. In 2018, I beg to differ. ICE agents aren't granted access to undocumented detainees inside Cook County Jail, and Cook County officials are not required to notify federal authorities when undocumented detainees are in local custody. Illinois state law also prohibits renting jail beds to ICE. Yet Homan remained committed to a heavy-handed crackdown on immigration in Chicago, saying you start with the bad guys who commit crimes and then the others around them. At least as it stands right now, at least when we covered it early on at the Gary Chicago International Airport, no, not in Chicago, but in Gary, Indiana. That's where the nonviolent offenders, migrants, go. We covered that story. It was during 2018. It was the time when Rahm Emanuel was still mayor of Chicago, and the buses were halted by the protesters. We later found out that those buses got rerouted to O'Hare Airport. Okay, and by the way, like, I'll never forget to Daniel's face when we got to the Gary Chicago International Airport. He says, "Are you sure this is an airport?" It's like, "Yeah, this is an airport. Look, it's right out there in the open. You wouldn't even notice it." Immigrants are significantly less likely to commit crimes than the U.S.-born citizens, research shows. I don't want to talk to victims. I want to talk to the guys they locked up, said Homan, who will replace Vice President Kamala Harris in the loosely defined role without inherent power. Trump has also voiced his full support for Homan, who is not subject to Senate approval to find ways to execute the largest domestic deportation in American history. Excuse me. Excuse me. And again, for those of you who may not know, but in 2023, there were, and especially in 2022 as well, there were a lot of migrants in front of police stations, encampments before the Chicago winter hit. There was no plan to take care of all of these migrants. There was no plan to give them shelter. Many of these migrants were exposed to the elements. And in a city like Chicago, where the weather changes, we have 4 seasons, not the hotel, but 4 seasons. Many people got sick. And there's been many people calling out the overall sanity or sanitation of these shelters. We've had a good friend of the show, Jamal Green, on our program, in which he called out a few sanitation, sanctuary shelters that didn't meet the requirements for the safety of humans to be living in them. This is not Homan's first time around. He was acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement from January 2017 to June 2018 and was known as an architect of the Trump administration's zero tolerance policy that separated more than 5,500 immigrant children from their parents at the U.S.-Mexican border, according to NPR. As of April, there were 1,401 children still without confirmed reunification with their parents, according to a report from the Department of Homeland Security. Way to Biden it up, Biden. Homan left the position in 2018 under political and public pressure, but has since contributed to Project 2025 Initiative, a controversial conservative playbook to reshape the country under Trump, authored by some now selected for major roles in his second presidency. The tough-talking Homan has gone on a conservative media blitz since getting the nod from Trump, taking aim at sanctuary cities and its Democrat leaders. Last month, Homan said he'd be willing to put Denver Mayor Mike Johnson, another Johnston, in jail for shielding migrants from federal forces. Johnson's office did not return Block Club's request for comment, but in a press conference last month, the mayor reasserted a commitment to Chicago's sanctuary city status. It is a situation that's also putting the city under heavy financial strain. And in many of the neighborhoods, there's been growing resentment towards many of these shelters. And I was concerned about this because of the overall situation that could impact a lot of migrants. I mean, again, Chicago is a powder keg. Anger and resentment is starting to grow, and the failure of Mayor Brandon Johnson and all the other scandals surrounding his entire administration is a perfect recipe for everything to go ham in Chicago. We will not bend or break, Mayor Johnson said. Our values will remain strong and firm. We will face likely hurdles in our work over the next 4 years, but we will not be stopped and we will not go back. The city has struggled to accommodate over 50,000 arrivals since Republican governors began busing migrants to Democrat-led sanctuary cities in 2022, with local officials standing up as many as 28 temporary shelters that have been criticized for subpar conditions and limits on stays. And those conditions have been very deplorable, with disease and sewage being found. There was no plan. And anytime me and Daniel did bring it up to many of the people that were for the sanctuary cities, we were always dismissed. Well, hey, don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to do a protest in front of Trump Tower, right? The shelters have been steadily closing since President Joe Biden capped daily border crossings. A Republican promised to send more migrant buses to Chicago ahead of the Democratic National Convention last summer. That didn't materialize. Trump now says he would use the military to declare a national emergency to enforce mass deportations. But on Monday, Homan tried to assure the crowd there wouldn't be army tanks or sweeps in Chicago neighborhoods. It's a very targeted operation, Homan said. We know exactly what we're looking for, and they'll be arrested. It's unclear how much the Chicago Police Department may already be informally assisting ICE, which has a Chicago outpost. Homan thanked the large presence of local police in the crowd Monday night. You know what this is a code word for? The CPD is all on board. Mayor Brandon Johnson has earned no love from the Chicago Police Department. All right, so this could very well happen. It was quiet outside the Portage Park Banquet Hall, which was patrolled by a private security company. Homan didn't stay long after his remarks, and was driven off with a police escort. Those sticking around to hobnob to Christmas tunes and gift MAGA hats included Alderman Nicholas Sapato and former Alderman Bob Frietti and other local conservatives. The event in Spato's far northwest side ward, where Trump won over 40% of the vote, which says a lot, and the neighboring 41st ward outright, the first time for a Republican presidential candidate since 1992. It's time. It's our time to take our city back, said Chuck Hernandez, chair of the Chicago Republican Party. Let me be clear here. The influence of the Democratic machine, while the machine is starting to break and crumble, please read the book American Pharaoh. It'll give you a good idea about Chicago politics and Old Man Daly. If you want to run Chicago politics, yeah, you're running as an independent, but then you got to put that D around your neck, on your shoulder, in your hand. So technically, you don't really have to be a Democrat in Chicago, but you will be wearing that D. Was that a crude joke? Absolutely. But anyways, they think we okay, continuing on. Homan said he met some Democratic alder people Monday who are on the same page as him regarding deportations. They think we need to be doing the right thing, he said. The political action committee behind the event has also contributed to Alderman Anthony Napolitano, according to public records. Alderman Raymond Lopez posted a photo with Homan on social media. Great meeting. Incoming border czar Lopez wrote on X, "We must enforce the laws, starting with removing those committing dangerous violent crimes with impunity because they have asylum protections." Other local Democratic officials have been openly critical of Homan since he was announced as border czar. The Trump administration's goal is to inflict maximum damage on diverse American families, our children, our communities, Congresswoman Delia Ramirez said in a statement last month. To that end, it is no surprise Trump wants Homan at the helm. But let it be known, I will fight like hell to keep our families together, and our communities are ready to be an obstacle at every turn as he tries to implement his cruel, vile, gruesome plan. One Democratic mayor who spared Homan's criticism, was spared Homan's criticism, New York City Mayor Eric Adams, who scheduled a meeting Thursday with Homan to discuss deportation plans. Yep, I can see that coming. I think Adams, understands his number one responsibility is the safety and security of the community, Homan said. Adams is under federal indictment for bribery, wire fraud, conspiracy, and 2 counts of soliciting campaign contributions from foreign nationals for allegedly embracing perks from the Turkish government. Charges he claims are politically motivated because of his criticism of Biden's immigration policies. So, Chicago's going to be a showdown. There's going to be a fight in our city. And in order to see it all, tune into Hardlands Media. January 20th, Trump gets sworn in. January 20th will be that day. And in 2027 will be the Chicago city elections. In my opinion, Mayor Brandon Johnson is done. He will be a one-term mayor, like Lightfoot, and it's up in the air of who will succeed Mayor Brandon Johnson. His policies are not popular. Chicago is right now in some dire financial straits. There is still unchecked corruption. There's abuse of power, and Brandon Johnson's administration has failed miserably. And in turn, he added more fuel to the fire by his administration's failure to provide any real solution or help for the migrants living in this city. I have said this was going to happen, that eventually there's going to be a point in which the migrants would be deported again because there was no plan. There was no plan. And the constituents in the city of Chicago from the north side, south side, west side are speaking out. And if there's any evidence to also add that there's growing resentment, if you look at the city election, which we covered here, this is the city election, but November 5th election, in which Trump won, there were many districts that did have a solid turnout for Donald Trump. Collectively, altogether, in the city of Chicago, Trump got 22% of the vote. Now, Chicagoans don't go out to vote. I mean, it's been beaten out of us. But it says a lot. That says a lot to me about what lies in store for us for 2027. Stay tuned to Hardlands Media. I said it before, I said it again. Chicago's going to be a battleground, but not something we're all too familiar with. You got to be a Chicagoan to go with the punches. This one's not going to be any different.